Hello, my name is Hamla Dobbins, and this is Memphis Material, an oral history project chronicling the stories of the visual arts in Memphis, Tennessee. Memphis Material is a podcast celebrating the personal histories, intimate stories, and the studio practices of some of the people who help shape the creative landscape of our city. These unedited interviews are all recorded at the Memphis Listening Lab, an archival gem located in the majestic Crosstown Concourse in beautiful Midtown Memphis. Now, the website for Memphis Material was designed by the wonderful Brian Dixon. We don't have sponsors for this project, but if we did, today's interview, the second of two interviews that we did with Tim Andrews, would be brought to you by Birds and Flowers. Somehow they are always here for us. Now, the interview for today was with Tim Andrews, and it was recorded on March 18th, 2025. Enjoy the interview. Last time, as you left, could you remember any names that you were like, oh, I totally forgot that person's name? Did you have that moment of like driving home and saying, oh, no, I
did.
Need to go this? Yeah.
I did, but of course, I've forgotten it all by now. I really do have a really horrible time with remembering things, but I think a lot of it is the medications I take. So it seems to be getting, I call it age-related cognitive decline, but I think part of it is also, I'm on a ton of meds, and some of them are kind of make most people kind of groggy, but they don't make me that way. Mm-hmm. But they help control the level of pain in my body from the joint damage and all that from the hemophilia.
Yeah, that's really important. Now, I had a couple of questions because I got to go back and re-listen to it. And so there were a couple of things that I was thinking about. One was that you were saying that when you were at Arkansas Tech, that you were in a fraternity and you were there, and then you had a fraternity brother who encouraged you to go there. And of course, the voice in the back of my head, the listener, chimed in and said, Hamlet, wait, Tim was a gay man in a fraternity at Arkansas Tech, and was that complicated? Was that tricky? How did that work? And so was that something that, in terms of your experience, where does that fit in?
I wasn't out to the fraternity at that time.
Okay.
Yeah, but they were a great bunch of guys. I had a wonderful time there.
Right. Because, we're talking about the early 80s.
Yeah.
Which was a very different time than, obviously we are now.
And I was 22, 23.
Right.
So
that's when a lot of people are sowing their wild oats.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And so, let's see. What were the other I had another question as we were going through. Oh, one thing I was wondering about, you were talking about teaching, and teaching the youngins. Where did you get your curriculum? Where did you get lessons? Was this something that you had to invent on your own, or something that you were given?
Well, it depends on which ones. The Saturday school program, when I did the younger kids, a lot of that was I was subbing for a regular, so I was following their syllabus. When I took over the AP program from Bill Hicks, he had a syllabus, and then me and Fred Burton, I worked with some of the projects off his syllabus and worked those in as well. So, and I guess that's where most of that came from. So I picked up Bill's now, and Bill Hicks is amazing. That first class I had Adam Shaw in it, and I just had to think of things for him to do because he could already draw better than I ever could. So it's like, well, here, I'll try to keep you interested, but yeah, he's super talented.
For me, one of the great things about teaching is that it gives us an opportunity to really show the students the thing that we're excited about.
Right.
We're able to kind of like give them a sense of the stuff that we really enjoy, and that's given us a kind of satisfaction. When you're thinking about yourself as a teacher, when you are doing those classes, What kinds of things do you think you brought to the classroom that maybe other people did not, maybe Burton or Hicks?
All right, so I had the advantage, and I think Bill Hicks probably did this some as well, but because it was through the Memphis College of Art, we could have nude models for the kids. We got all the parents to sign off, and if they didn't want them to, then I would let them know that week we were going to have a nude model, and if they didn't want to participate, they didn't have to. I'd give them other curricular, but most everybody did. Everybody's parents signed off, and so that was one thing I leaned heavy into the figure with these kids, because that was it was two things. One, they're not going to get that anywhere else in their lives, and two, it gave their portfolios a little bit of an edge in getting them ready for college, because a lot of high schools don't allow that figure study like that. But yeah, I'd say that was because the figure was kind of my thing.
No, I mean, when you were talking about that last time, I remember you were talking about how the nude figure, when you were talking about yourself and Alice Neal, and how important that was in terms of not just vulnerability, but in terms of the shedding of all of the facades.
Right.
Like it was a very real, present thing. I'm interested, like when you were saying you working on the figure with the AP classes kind of gave them a little bit of an edge up, etc. And then, of course, we all teach the figure a little bit differently. And I'm super interested in terms of how you got the students past. P.S. I'm totally asking this question because I want to steal some ideas from you, because whenever we do the nude model, students always freak out. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is, Tim, how did you get these kids to relax enough and get past all of the weirdness to make some kick-ass drawings of these nude models?
Wow. I've never thought about that. I mean, about the freaking out part. Every now and then we'd have an off comment, but not very often. But what I did was I always started out quick. Like do fast things first. Gesture drawings, get them comfortable with that figure moving around in front of them, and then contour drawings, but just really quick minute timed things, and they don't have time to not be comfortable. They're trying to keep up. Right. And so by the time they're starting to produce some things and loosen up, well, then they're used to it. And after they're used to it, then it's no big deal.
Right. Now, I'm also curious about some things that you were able to talk to the students about in terms of drawing, and then also in terms of setting the stage for them to begin to think about how to incorporate the nude into a drawing, or how to use the nude for a drawing. And so were you showing them things that were kind of like we were talking about Alice Neal and Max Beckman,
yes,
and Cat Moon?
Yes, we would do a little bit of a slideshow about once a month about artists that I wanted them to look at, and then I would take those artists while they were in their heads and somehow try to work elements of their work into our still lifes or our model sessions. I was also really big on big, complicated still lifes. Like I had 2 big cabinets just full of objects, and I might include a model right in the middle of all that I'd built up, so that there was always something interesting to draw. Like it didn't matter what your angle was, because I hated when I was in drawing class if I got stuck with a bad angle and I just had to sit there and deal with it. And so I made sure that the kids could, well, one, we weren't real tight on rules. Like if you got in, you got set up and you didn't like your position, it was no big deal for them to get up and move around and all that. But I think keeping their attention was part of it, and I used different complicated, interesting objects, which we mentioned last time about how my studio was sort of a work in progress on its own. It sort of was like a lot of those objects I'd pull down, borrow, collect. A lot of them I still have.
Now, talk to me about some of those things. What were some of the objects?
Oh, I had a whole collection of skulls because I've always thought bones and skulls were very interesting. You can do so much with them. There's so many references in art history with them as well. And of course, the college had a couple of skeletons that hung out in the drawing room. We'd use those all the time. I had tons of just anytime there was extra pottery laying around that somebody didn't like and they were going to throw out, I'd grab it. I would do a lot of things. Like I would go, and the school let me have a budget for this sort of thing if I needed it. But I would go get pumpkins, just go get 10, 15 pumpkins, different sizes and shapes, and, that. I had a big thing that we would do with watermelons. I had one exercise where I literally made like a mountain of toilet paper, not on a model stand. It was probably 3-4 feet high on a model stand, and all those same shapes, and then you light that dramatically, and it's perfect for teaching them how to shade. I mean, they've got round, they've got geometric, just depending on where it can either be a soft curve or something really hard and rigid. So that was a good, and it's just a bunch of toilet paper.
I love how you were explaining that, and that as I was listening to you talk about it, I was thinking, oh my God, my students would lose their minds. It would be one of those things where it was like, what? Where do we start? Now, I'm super interested in terms of thinking about the dynamic in the classroom, because as you talk about teaching, you sort of light up, and that you can tell that it's something that you really enjoy.
Oh, I love it.
And as we left last time, you were like, oh, next time we got to talk about the AP kids. What do you think it was about that experience that was as satisfying as it was?
I think you learn through teaching, and I love learning. So, it's almost you get a new class, you get great personalities. All these kids wanted to be there. That's a big thing. It was very rarely that I got a kid that just didn't want to participate. And that was usually in the Saturday school programs, not the AP. And if they did, I wasn't going to force a kid to sit there and sit in my class and disrupt because they're upset. It's like, if you don't want to be here, go somewhere else. But no, most of my kids, they really wanted to be there, so they're participating. And I'm really helping them to get, like I said, they're going to get an AP credit. That's going to happen. But I wanted them to have a competitive portfolio if they wanted to continue, so that they could get scholarship monies with a good portfolio. And they were eager to do that as well. And that was really my goal at the end of the day.
Now, thinking about those classes, like how large are we talking about? Like what's the class size?
15 to 20 kids.
Oh, okay. So it was super manageable size. Yeah. Now, where would those classes happen?
They were at in the figure drawing class there that Fred Burton used as well.
Okay, so they were able to kind of be in the grown-up space, as it were.
Absolutely.
And then were the students coming from all over, or were they sort of focused
all the local schools? I even had a kid from Millington once. You could apply. The portfolios were judged blind. And it was great for me because I could sit there and look at the names of the schools, but I came from Arkansas. I didn't know anything about Memphis schools.
Right.
So I really was picking my portfolios just based on the merit of the drawings. I remember one year I thought, I've got to be better about diversity. I'm going to try to look at these drawings and see who I think the kids are. That was the dumbest thing I ever tried to do because I got it all wrong. I'd have a drawing of some black football players that were a really strong drawing, but I thought, oh, this will be a young black man. In walks an Oriental girl, and that's her portfolio. I got it all wrong. So it's like, well, we're never going to do that again. We're going to go back to just doing it by, here's the strongest 20 drawing students, and they're who's going to be in the class.
Right.
And how it shakes out, it shakes out.
And did you notice when you did it that way, was it more balanced, or did you notice, because like for example, when I think maybe we were talking about it last time, the biology students would always be the best ones, and so you would have sort of like maybe people who were skewed more towards sciences or whatever. Did you find that it didn't work that way, that it was more evenly dispersed?
I think I just had better classes. But yeah, I think it was more evenly, like boys, girls, different races. But I didn't worry about that too much, except that one time that I thought I was going to be, clever. And yeah, it just sort of worked that way. I guess I had a couple of classes that were a little higher on the white kids, like from White Station and Central, those art kids from there. But yeah, it was a real mixed group. And all my students participated, and they all did great.
Now, how long would this program last? It was every Saturday for a semester?
Yeah, every Saturday we went from until after lunch. We'd get there in the morning, start, and we'd work 3-4 hours.
Wow.
On a Saturday afternoon.
Now, was it mostly spent making things, or was there some time that was spent?
We would do critiques, and then we would draw first and then do critiques at the end of the day usually. And then every so often we wouldn't have a drawing session. We'd just go over portfolios and do a big critique with, here's your best things. What are you doing? What are you thinking? Where do you want to take this next time? Mm-hmm. You've got a lot of good, like maybe their work was all contour drawings or heavy on contour drawings. Then you want to get some shading in these. You want to start pulling some shapes, some color, that sort of thing to add to round out your portfolio. Mm-hmm. So that was sort of the way we did it. It was a mix up. The thing too, back to your question about how the classes kind of ran, I was super laid back with these kids. We had music playing the whole time, and we would talk. We would, somebody'd bring up something, whatever the was going on in Memphis or maybe in the world, or favorite musicians. And so conversations would just get going, and we'd talk as we drew. That was, like I said, my class was real, and I let them know they could talk about anything with me. And we'd get into some really intense, interesting conversations about stuff. Mm-hmm. So I think that, as an artist, you are interested in these things, what is current in the day, mm-hmm. and you want to figure out how to make that or bring that into your work. And so sometimes I'd challenge them about things like that, mm-hmm.
Now, when you were talking about that, I mean, again, we're thinking about a particular time, late 80s, early 90s. And thinking about that, I mean, that's such a beautiful way of describing it, to be able to talk about these things while we work. There's this activity that's happening, and we can sort of be occupied by these other conversations. One of the things I love as a teacher is being in those conversations, but also eavesdropping on those conversations. Yeah. I mean, there's such an interesting way of approaching one another at the same time while you're making a thing. And, sometimes the thing can be about that thing that we're talking about, or it could be something completely different. I'm curious about those conversations. So, like, for example, one that I remember is when Colorado legalized weed and gay marriage at the same time. And I remember my students, we were kind of talking about it. And I said, well, what do you think about this? And they would talk to me about it. And then they would say, wait, you're the teacher. And I would have to say, I don't know anything about gay marriage or legalizing marijuana. I have no idea I don't know anything about that. And so that's why I'm asking you about it. Just out of curiosity, what were some of those conversations? Like, as you were saying, we would have some conversations that were kind of strong. What are some things that you have in your mind in terms of thinking about that particular time period?
Well, so we're actually moving more toward the 90s, but, the first Gulf War, and then the continuation of that. I a couple of international students, like not many, but just a couple that were here going to one of the local high schools on their on a visa I guess there was a exchange program. They were here as exchange students, and so I had a couple of students, and so we talk a little bit about international stuff, but of course most of it was Memphis, whatever was going on there. We talked about the music scenes, a lot about bands of the day. One of my students, the one I mentioned earlier that had the football drawing, Reiko, she, Japanese American, she was in one of the, do you know the band Lucero?
Yeah.
Okay. She was started with Ben and Brian, and the very first time I saw them play, she was playing violin for them in a red silk, like Asian type silk dress that was sort of a pencil skirt. She had long black hair, and she's up there in a spotlight playing. I went to see her and her new band. So we'd do things like that. We'd also go out places. We'd go out into the park and draw, or we'd go to the zoo. A lot of times we went to the zoo and drew. And so we just kind of all become friends. I'm friends with a lot of those students to this day. Couple of my students, Eric and Tony, Eric Cooley and Tony Max, two of Memphis's best tattoo artists now. They were in the same class, and they were very competitive. And Eric was just as ADHD as he could be. He was a drummer in a band as well, like a big, like a slightly heavy metal band sort of thing. But all day long, he's just moving like he could run a power plant until he started drawing. And then it was just boom, he was concentrating, and he was as still as he could be working on that drawing. And then the minute he set that pencil down, he's back to fidgeting and moving. And him and Tony had a rivalry in my class because they were two of the best artists in there. And every time one of them would do something that they thought that was a better drawing, then they just passed the best drawing of the week thing back and forth with each other a lot. So they were very competitive, and I thought it was funny that they both ended up being tattoo artists.
Now, I would imagine, you were saying that you were friends to this day with a lot of them. I can imagine that experience for them, going to MCA and being in that space and having like a cool teacher.
Watching a lot of them become teachers that are, to this day, today teaching in the Memphis school system. Amanda McKnight.
Oh, yeah.
She was one of my students. Who else is teaching? There's several. My mind again.
That's okay.
There we go.
No worries. Okay. Now, I'm curious, in terms of thinking about your work, one of the things we talked about last time was how there was a kind of public response to the work, like you were talking about. The commercial appeal would run stories on you, National AIDS Day or World AIDS Day, and then some of the backlash that would happen from there. To me, I know that it was a different time, but to me, the different time makes it even scarier and even riskier in terms of making art that was so powerful and so important and so meaningful for you. And I know you were saying like you'd really have to hit me with a brick to mess me up, but to me that seems like that would be particularly difficult, in terms of my own psychic stress, dealing with not necessarily the scrutiny, but because really at that time it was such a, it wasn't, it's not just at the time, of course, here we are in 2025 having the conversations that we're having now.
That are very much, we could be having that conversation about something going on right now today.
Right. And I'm curious, how was it that you were able to process that as a
We,
person?
well, first of all, I do have a pretty thick skin, but I remember one particular lady that was just really mean in a letter she wrote that had, and saying, you know, I deserve to die of AIDS and go to hell and all those things. She was coming from a very religious background point of view. And one of my dear friends that I was doing, you know, I told you I did the birdhouses. I was in the sort of that craft circuit. Ainsley, she wrote a letter back to the Commercial Appeal the next week about that lady's response that was just amazing and supportive, and, you know, just saying that you take that view. She was saying that she was a straight woman from the suburbs, which is how that other lady had described herself, and that, you know, let me give you a lesson in, you know, how to treat people, like, basically. But, you know, so I had people that came to my defense, I guess is what I'm saying. And I always chalked it up to kind of like, that was the version of what today is don't read the comments. You know, it's sort of the same thing. That was the way hateful people could hide behind a letter to the editor, and no one ever had to, you know, I don't even remember if that had a name to it now that I think about it, but it probably did.
Well, I mean, another thing, I mean, when I'm thinking about your work, I mean, to me, you were talking about the vulnerability and the lack of a facade. I mean, to me, that kind of lack of vulnerability and that kind of honesty and sincerity, to me, is one of the things that really drew me to your work, in the way that it feels both like a response to all of that, but then also a kind of, not a response to all of that. Hang on, let me phrase that better. Like, in terms of thinking about your pieces, there is an acknowledgement of the vulnerability. There's an acknowledgement of the condition of the body, the weakness, the frailty of the body, but also the strength and the beauty of the body. And to me, that was always really interesting, that you would have both of those sort of present. I'm curious, how were you thinking about that during that time? Because, you know, again, you're dealing with a lot physically and societally.
Well, so I've always been sick, and I say sick, you know, quotation marks. You know, I've always been told, whether you use lame, cripple, whatever, that's going to be your reality for your life. Well, I chose a kind of different way to look at it and a different path. So I guess I always looked at it different, but I also wanted to show it, because I knew there were a lot of people who looked at it that way. You know, they see my legs as broken and unusable, and I have fought really hard to make sure that I could keep those legs under me and keep moving forward. To what you said about that push and pull, about the vulnerability and showing that, and what you are looking for, Vita Reed, one time in a critique of my big self-portraits, this was the ones I was doing during graduate school, she said, "Tim, these ask all the right questions. And if you're listening, they even answer them." And so I was just like, "Oh, wow." Couldn't get any better than that as a critique.
Way to go, Vita.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
Way to go, you, for making the piece that would make Vita think that. I'm curious, I mean, just to sort of crack that open, and the last thing I want to do is be like, well, this mark means this, and this mark means that. And because I love how you said last time we were talking that if you really wanted to tell everybody everything, you would be a writer.
Yeah.
And so I like that about that. But I'm curious in terms of, you know, like, one of the things I ask my students a lot is, so imagine someone standing in front of your piece, and what's the thing in the thought bubble above their head? And then they come up to you and they say, "Oh, I totally get you, blank, blank, blank." And then you feel like you've succeeded, you've done the thing. And I know it's different from piece to piece, but I'm curious in terms of thinking about that, because I mean, in a lot of ways, your work has always been political, big P or little p or all caps. And so, in that way, there's almost like a kind of, not necessarily like a speech or
A little in your
message.
face.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious, as you were, I mean, I know we're also talking about a huge amount of time, but I'm curious, what are some things that you feel like the work does for you in terms of your outward expression towards the world?
Well, I think the work I was making back then, especially, was, I'm not hiding. I'm not going away. Maybe some of those slogans that I became familiar with around ACT UP, we're here, we're queer, and we're going to stay here. But that was like a small sliver. And there were many of those small units because I'm very complicated, as we all are. That's only one aspect of me. To me, the more important aspect was about my dealing with disability my whole life. Okay, I'm gay too. And I put my sexuality in there, I think, was it Corey? I don't remember who wrote this, but said men in Memphis wouldn't know they had a penis unless they saw one of Tim Andrews' drawings because he shows his. Because somebody was freaking out again about a picture or a show, and so I think it was over on Broad Street, Karen Schrader's old gallery, or maybe it was that was going on, but that might have been one of Bob's drawings actually that was causing the big stir over there.
Oh,
Bob Schatzer, yeah. So
That's funny.
we were together for about 7 years.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so we were making art there together a lot.
Okay.
That was about that time,
Mm-hmm.
a little earlier.
Now, thinking about that sliver, I mean, you were saying that the queerness and the disability was sort of a sliver of what was going on in terms of your multifaceted life. I'm curious, like, as you talk about that, and one of the things I love about us is that we've gotten to be older. And so what do you think, how has that story changed from 26-year-old Tim to 65-year-old Tim?
Well, it's all been tied, like I said, to my health. Because, I was making art really strong up until about 2000. And I had to go to Arkansas to have a knee replacement. I had a replacement became infected. I had to have it removed. It was going to be weeks before you could put a new one back in, so you don't have a knee. With me, it turned out to be about 8 weeks. So it was a real complicated process. And I really think they thought that I'd probably end up them having to take all the metal out of that leg, which meant that I wouldn't have use of that leg. I would be in a wheelchair. Well, I wasn't going to have that. So I went and got that fixed. And then right behind that, I had a bad wreck and broke both my legs again and didn't touch my feet to the floor for my wreck was in November, and I think it was March before I could put my toe to the floor again.
Wow.
So I had all that time that I was not making work. Now I started making work again, started painting again, still emphasizing self-portraiture. But the only show I think that I've had since I moved back to Memphis, because I was over in Arkansas for about 6 years with all that, and then my sister started having kids, and I wanted to be there and know them and let them be old enough to know me. So, and my niece, her babies too. So I could be Uncle Tim with them for the rest of their lives, and that was important. So I was out of Memphis for about 6 years. And when I returned, one of the few shows I've been in, me and Joel had done some shows together, but was the Man show that was over at what is the gallery over in Laurelwood?
Oh, at David Lusk?
No, my brain. Not Lee Skirts.
L. Ross?
L. Ross Gallery.
Okay, yep.
Okay, we had a show at L. Ross. Carl Moore was in it, or put it together. I think he put it together, and the gentleman that you mentioned when we first started our interview.
Yeah, Chuck Johnson.
Chuck Johnson was in it. Mm-hmm. So I had 2 paintings in that show, and that's probably the last I showed anything. I've been making work, but I haven't shown any of it. And then I know this sounds like, this is why I say my health is the thing that sort of gets in the way of me making work and facilitates me making work. It's the engine, it's that rage in you against that disability and disease so in 2017, 2018, I got Guillain-Barré and was paralyzed again, laying flat on my back for a year, just about, before Guillain-Barré strips all your nerve coverings. You lose them, and as you lose them, you can't make neuron connections, and you slowly become paralyzed until they can stop it. They finally diagnosed me. They stopped it. But it was a year before I could do anything again. And then this left hand would not work. It did not come back. It was just as dead as that. It took me 2 years to get that where I can use it again. And both my hands came back affected. They weren't before. So I've had to kind of start to relearn how to make art again. And get those connections, that hand-eye coordination and back. So I'm just working through that now. I've gone back to making art more about birds, just because birds are comfortable, familiar. Doesn't matter what the subject is right now. Although I did the other day clear out a big space for another big mirror in my studio so I could have I was like, I need to start putting that out there, and so we'll see what happens. But yeah, so you can see how my battle with my health is, like I said, both the thing that makes me want to make art more,
right,
and the thing that gets in the way of making art. So,
okay, let's go back up to did you say it was a motorcycle accident?
No,
or just a car wreck?
A truck.
A truck.
I was in my truck.
Yeah.
I was on a road that I was not familiar with, and it was foggy night. I was the only one involved in the wreck. There was a curve right at the end of this road, and they had re-graveled the road, and that came onto that curve, and some of that loose gravel had been drug out onto that curve. So I was approaching the curve in the fog, and then by the time I realized there was a curve there, maybe I was driving too soon because I just had my operations or just recovered from them. I had just laid my cane down in October from all the physical therapy, and this was November 3rd that I had the wreck and broke it all again.
Now, what did you do? You were talking about your early life where you were unable to get out and go around and do things, and you were sort of at the home, and you were making the drawings at home. I'm curious, what did you do for that? You said it was 6 months that you were sort of laid up?
Oh, longer than that. But, as far as before I was healed, because I broke both my legs in multiple places. I broke my back, and I had a pretty bad head injury and an eye injury. And I bled for 8 hours because they took me in the wrong direction. The medical team thought that, and probably rightly so, I'm alive, that they needed to work on the fact that I had so much trauma to the body and was going to go into shock and die. And so they took me to the biggest medical facility they could think of, which was ULAR in Little Rock. But my mom was 15 minutes away with my factor. That would have been a smarter choice to get factor in me and then take me to the ULAR. But they didn't do that. So subsequently, it was like 8 hours before I got factor. And so by then, my legs had swollen to the point that there was a very good chance I would lose them. So there was all that trauma and, but to your point, I think I've got a little off base there. Yes, I was laid up yet again, for a long period of time. And art did help. I had my books. I went right back to sketchbooks, drawing, small things. Joel was in San Francisco, but he was sending me letters on a regular basis, and I'm corresponding and sending him back envelopes that I've, drawn and painted on. And so we had that connection. Just friendships and family got me through it again.
Now, what kind of things were you drawing, just out of curiosity?
Again, a lot of flowers and birds and things like that. I had a couple of interesting drawings that I did in the hospital, like with the mirror that was on the little bedside table thing that they put over your, the little flip up place to eat dinner and all that. Mm-hmm. So I'd done a couple of little watercolors with those. But yeah, it was all just pattern and symbolism. I had gotten into some symbols, like magical symbols, and using those. And I was real fascinated by snakes and the medical staff having the snakes on it. What is that? Not a Ouroboros. Oh, there's a name for it. But
And so you were doing that, and then tell me about this Guillain-Barré syndrome. I had a friend who had that, but I just know that it is scary as hell.
It is.
And then there's some paralysis and some inability to move your body, and so I don't think I even know, like, what is it?
So it's a reaction your body has. It's an autoimmune reaction to something, usually a sickness or a trauma, or a flu shot can trigger it. And that's what mine was. I had gotten a flu shot in October, and this was right around Thanksgiving that I collapsed. And I had noticed, I think I was working I was getting pigeons again. I hadn't had them for a while, and I'd made a loft, and I was getting pigeons back. And so I was working in that loft, and I was like, Tim, you have got to start working out or something. That drill should not be that heavy. I'm both hands holding up a drill, putting something together. And just 2 or 3 things. I fell a couple of times that was like, well, that was stupid. What's up? Pay attention. Well, it was starting to happen in my body, and I didn't know it. I had no idea. But one day I'm sitting there, and I told John, I was like, John, I can't move my arm. Like, I can't move my arm. I think we need to go to the hospital. And so we thought I was having a stroke, of course. By the time he got me to the car, my legs completely collapsed. So we got me to the med, which is where you take anybody with hemophilia in Memphis has to go to the med, the trauma center. And that was another thing too. When I collapsed, I broke all these adhesions loose in one of my knees that had been straight, and it was because of tissue adhesions. Well, I collapsed on it and snapped them all. Very painful, but it was a good thing because then I could bend my knee. So when we arrived at the hospital, I was like, okay, John, we've got to get factor in me because I know that knee's bleeding. and we don't want it to get it heat all gummed up again. So let's work on that and see if you get a towel and put under that knee. And he's like, Tim, you're having a stroke and you're worried about your knee. I was like, we've got two things going on. Let's work on the good thing, the knee. So I was happy that the knee could bend, but I didn't have a clue what this other thing was. It took them about 4 or 5 days to diagnose me, because you have to kind of go through all the things it's not. It wasn't MS, it wasn't a stroke, as it turned out. And actually, George Treadwell, Nicole Treadwell's husband at the time, well, he's passed now, that's why I say that. He diagnosed me over the phone talking to John about what my symptoms were. And he said, ask them if they've thought of Guillain-Barré. So the next time they came in, John said, a friend of ours that's a doctor said, could it be Guillain-Barré? And they all just lit up like, oh, of course that's what it is. We just hadn't thought of that. So they give me the spinal tap, which is the test to prove that it is Guillain-Barré. And I had proteins in my spinal fluid from all those sheaths coming off my nerves.
And you were laid up for a year.
It took, because it went ahead and progressed to the point that they thought they were going to have to put me on a ventilator, but they got it stopped with this drug called IVIG, which is sort of like a little immune system in a bottle. And I don't know how much of everything when I get sick has got to go through 2 or 3 filters. They have to run it by, well, could it be something with the hemophilia? Well, could it be something with the HIV? Because now I've been HIV positive since I was in my early 20s. So they don't know what that's doing to my immune system, my nervous system. I've been on these antiviral drugs so many years. Again, they don't know what exactly is going on. Sometimes I'll have odd things, and it's like, well, we don't know. It could be that. And it's like, but all that was what they were trying to work through when they got to the Guillain-Barré. So the point being that they arrested the paralysis, but my legs didn't work and my arms didn't work. It was all the way up to where it was starting to affect my lungs. So I had to wait and let all of those grow new nerve, and they grow 1 millimeter a day on regrow. And it regrows in the opposite way that it, like the way it progressed through my body, it just goes back down. So my hands were the last thing to go, but so they should have been the first thing to come back, but mine weren't. I got my legs back first, and then my arms, but my hands took forever. It was almost another year before I could use my hands.
So now, what kind of things are you thinking about now in terms of your studio?
Well, right now I'm kind of just getting back to the action of painting and being in my studio all the time, because I really believe that if you're going to make work, you've got to be in there when you get the idea and you put it down, and then it's like, oh, I like that, or no, that's not going to work. And you're going to have to burn through a lot of bad work before you get to something back to where you feel like it's good enough that you would show that to anybody. But right now I'm kind of interested in pattern, and I've been doing a lot of things with stencils because that's easier for me to manipulate, and then putting a bird image in there and seeing where that goes. It's funny, I was recently talking to Nicole Treadwell about her paintings that she's doing, and she said, Tim, birds keep appearing. She said, I'm not even trying to paint birds, but they just keep popping up in my paintings. I was like, well, that's a good thing. So
now I'm curious, so in terms of thinking about that time where you were making the things and sending them to Joel, and you were making the things, and it was maybe not necessarily about showing them to people, but it was about making the work. I'm always curious, especially because every once in a while there's a part of my brain that says, you don't really need to show these things. You can really just make them. There doesn't really have to be that kind of conversation between you and the world. It can just be you. How do you navigate that in terms of thinking about your place in the world as an artist?
Okay, I've always thought that the reason I make art is because I have to, and it's for me. It is. It's for me because it's something in me that just drives me to do it. Like I said, I think it's related to the illness, or maybe I've connected it to that. I've glued it to that somehow. But if there was anything, I guess, that I did for people to show, it was when I was making those birdhouses. I was making those with other people in mind, like, oh, somebody's going to love this. And I'm letting it go. It's going out in the world. So that was that side of me that wanted to, I guess, just make something for other people. But the paintings have always been something that I did for me. Now I've shown them from time to time. I have, but I've Marina Piscini did a retrospective of my work at Rhodes College. That would have been sometime in the 90s, the late 90s, where we pulled all the work I'd done, all the figure work that I'd done. And again, I think it was either World AIDS Day or they had had the AIDS quilt part of it come to Rhodes. And it was around one of those events, I believe. But yeah, that was one time that I showed all my work together. The other times that I've showed my work has mostly been studio shows and things that were around me being at martial arts, and shows that would kind of pop up group shows or something around that group of artists that was in that area working together and making things. So, yeah. Now I say that, but then, as I said, it also would always end up in the paper. So that was sort of a different thing that I don't count as like showing your art. That was like, okay, you've got to do this because it's the good civic thing to do, to draw attention, to be, that sort of thing. I was sort of a reluctant martyr in that sometimes, that I felt like I needed to do it because somebody needed to, but it wasn't something that I often, wasn't something I looked forward to or enjoyed. Depended on the person writing the article or doing the photography, or sometimes you could get some boneheaded questions or boneheaded misquotes. I learned that you had to be careful about what you said because it could be edited to sound totally different than what you meant it to say. They would leave the context of a remark out and just put the remark. So,
no, you were saying you've always made the work for yourself, or that's been a part of it. That's been a major part of it. And I'm curious to get you to talk a little bit more about that, because I think, we all have a certain kind of satisfaction or a certain kind of goal in mind as we make things. But I'm curious for you in terms of your work and your life especially. I'm super interested in how you think about it and what you think it does for you.
Well, I think there's an element to it that's a little bit healing. We talked about the fact that I can't just close my eyes and imagine something. I've got to be looking at it. So that's, I think, what got me started with self-portraiture. But there's also something very, I don't want to say seductive, that's not right, but appealing, alluring about sitting and staring at yourself for a long time and you're thinking about all these things that may be going on in your life or your body or whatever, but you're looking at yourself honestly and trying to capture that. And there's lots of little moments and magic that go on in that process that I think can be kind of healing and cathartic. And I'm usually not wearing clothes to the point of the vulnerability and the honesty that shares. See, so it doesn't matter that no one else sees it. If I'm seeing it, I don't know, I interpret that the same way. Like if I was looking at a figure in a figure drawing class, and that honesty and vulnerability, then that's me in my own mirror. I still see that in my own mirror. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So
for sure. I mean, and also one of the things I'm thinking about as you describe that experience, so much of our conversation has been about the vulnerability of the body. And when you are, some people would have been like, oh no, I'm going to turn my back on that. I've got to paint these other things. I'm not going to concentrate on my body. But like in your work, you really do not only concentrate on the body, but you're also sort of concentrating on, like you said, the vulnerability of the body.
The faults and the foibles and all the scars and...
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then also one thing I'm interested in, I feel like with sometimes when we do self-portraiture, it can almost become like a character. Like it is us, but it's also not us. Is there any of that in terms of your work and how you think about those images of yourself?
No, not so much. I guess, I see what you mean. Like you could almost use it like a shield, or that image becomes an avatar, sort of.
Yeah, like a stand-in.
Yeah, like a stand-in for yourself. I don't think so, because, like I said, I usually make them for me. So the few times I've shown them, I don't want to say I've been coerced or had my arm twisted, but a lot of times I had my arm twisted. It's like, oh, come on, let's do this show together. It's like, if you have a deadline, you'll make more work too.
Right.
It may not be done, but it's due. So there you go. Because that's another thing I'll do. I'll overwork a piece till it's dead. It's like, is it finished yet? Is it finished yet? Yeah, it's finished 6 iterations ago. Now it's just dead.
No, I'm also interested. I was talking earlier about us getting older. I'm curious how your experience in Memphis, how you think about it now being older. I know that you've lived sort of back and forth between Memphis and Arkansas, but I'm curious how you see Memphis as being different in terms of its art community and some of the things that are happening in terms of the work, and then if that is a cause for reflection on maybe what community was like before moving back to Arkansas for that 6-year period. We could do that too. But I'm curious, how do you see it as being different or better or worse, more this way or more that way?
Well, I do love there seem to be more opportunities for people to show their work, to make work, to this building we're sitting in. That's an amazing gem for Memphis, what they did here. There's so many separate little art communities have sprung up, like in Orange Mound and down at the Arts District, where used to be called the Medical District, or Art Farm folks. Then the Pinch, or the over on Flicker Street. There's just all over in Cooper Young. There's just little art populations popping up everywhere. It's almost like since the College of Art closed, everybody's trying to do their own little thing where they're trying to teach classes and get people making art and having a place that they could take their kids to make art and that sort of thing. I'm very interested to see what happens with the college, with the Metal Museum taking over the college. I'm glad that it's going to fall into the arts, another art institution. I hope we can get a school going again. Of course, we still have University of Memphis art department. It's not like that's gone, but I don't know. I think I haven't gotten as involved since I've moved back. It's funny. We have to kind of. There was another thing I was thinking about. We were kind of talking about all these little things that we did over our careers and what kind of helped us and all that. Another thing that we didn't mention that I think was the art center. All of us worked at the art center at some point or another, right?
Well, for me, my generational overlap was all of us worked for Carol DeForest.
Oh, yeah. Well, me too. Yeah. I did that too.
Making those plates.
Yeah, making those plates. Ceramic.
And with the big black dog, Dora.
Yes, Dora.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, talk to me about the art center, though. Let's stay there for a second.
Well, Rhonda Wilson. Now, if I start naming names, I'm gonna get in trouble. But there was a whole group of us that worked there for years and that made art. And Lisa Turbo, Susan Steele, that just were always there making art or interacting with the other people in the community that were making art. And I walk in there today and there's this whole new tribe of young people working at the art center. I'm like, I'm not connected with them as much as I was, but it's funny how that institution has remained through all of I never thought that place would have stood this many years, and I'm really glad it has.
Me too. I mean, it's a place where people run into one another that isn't at an art opening. And then there's always sort of like some people are in a rush and some people aren't in a rush, and so there's this really interesting dynamic that happens when you're there.
I always get into some great conversations just going in to buy, a tube of paint.
Now, how long did you work there?
Several years. While I was, it was all after I graduated. So 84, 85 through probably the early 90s.
Right.
Yeah, off and on a couple of times.
Now, one of the ways that I know you is through martial arts and the art farm time. What do you think, like, for me, one of the things I really love about having my studio at Martial Arts was that it was really the first time that I was around other people who took art really seriously enough to like pay rent at a place and
right.
to have a space that was theirs. How long were you there? And then thinking about martial arts, how did that click for you? How did that work for you in terms of your timeline?
Well, I was there until 2000, but in the 90s, off and on again, I was there a couple of times, a couple of different iterations when I had the money to go to rent a studio space or share one. I shared one a year or two before I had my own. But yeah, Pinckney was always, again, one of those people who's just been there for the community and had those spaces available. So, and there was a lot of camaraderie down there. Jeannie Siegel was always, down there a lot. David Mall.
And Jeannie was kind of like a 9-to-5er.
Yeah.
Like she would come in the morning and then she would leave in the afternoon, when she was done. I mean, it really was like a job. And
Yeah.
same with Carlos de Villasante.
Yes.
He was there when I was there. And I mean, he would come in the morning and fix his espresso on the mocha pot, and then he would paint, and then get some lunch or something, and then leave in the afternoon. And then there were the people who were there
At night. Yeah, I was usually more of the night crowd.
Yeah. Now, I'm curious about that, like thinking about that sense of community, because I know that's something that you've talked about a bunch. What do you think? Like how, I mean, it's kind of one of those duh questions, like, well, what's important about community? Well, of course it's important, Hamlet. But I'm curious, like in the same way that we were talking about all those other things, what do you think, how does community factor in terms of thinking about your wholeness or your particular practice?
Well, I think it's great to have a space where people can talk, not, whether you're talking about a painting, you're also talking about other things at the same time, And so you might ask somebody, well, what do you think about this particular element in a painting? How would you do that? And they can sit there and tell you, now you don't have to do that. I think that's one of the most dangerous things. Don't let someone else paint your paintings for you. But you take that and you run it through your brain and you see if there's any element of that sounds true enough that you're willing to give it a shot. So try it. If not, you can always put it back the way it was. So there's lots of those little surprise critiques that wouldn't happen if you didn't have a group of people that was moving through the same space. Because that's your creative space. You're in your creative mode when you're down there working. It's also really great and inspirational to see other people working around you. And like you said, the 9-to-5ers that really take it super serious and come in and put the work in on the work. It's funny, I'm reading a book right now that's called The Work of Art by Adam Moss.
Okay.
It's and he's interviewed all these artists about how they make their art.
Okay.
He's kind of trying to distill what it is that pushes people to make art. He himself had tried painting and didn't think his work was very successful. So then it's like, well, now what makes people successful at painting or writing? Or he has a whole, performers, comedians, all anyway. So the thing that he kind of seems to be, I'm not finished with the book yet, but the thread that I see connecting everyone is the drive to make it. That you've just got to have that drive to keep showing up and making the art. And that, there's something to be said for longevity. If you're there long enough, you meet more people see your work, that sort of thing, I guess. But I like the interacting with the different generations of more people. So
yeah, me too. I mean, that thing that you said about the different generations, and then as much as people will come into your space, you go into other people's spaces. I mean, for me, that was such a like with the 9-to-5ers, or like with Pinckney, or with whoever was there. There was a kind of energy and a kind of excitement. And sometimes kind of a frenzy of activity in terms of like how different people deal with their studio, and when someone has a deadline and when someone's going to be there for a long time. And then also just to sort of be around other people that take it as seriously as you. Sometimes it's kind of like a, not a competitive thing, but kind of like a thing where we want to keep up, or...
Well, and you get exposed to different mediums, and even though at school you might have gone through most of them, we'd have somebody down there working on murals, and then somebody doing little glass work that was melted in a kiln and made these little great jewel-like pieces. And it's, things that you had never done. And it's like, wow, that's awesome. I might need to try some of that.
Right.
How would that fit into my work?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Now, I'm also interested in terms of thinking about other artists, I mean, one of the things I love about you is that you've been around for so long, and I know one of the things also that you talked about a couple of times were the different places where you had these connections inside the city, inside the community. I'm curious, you obviously talked about some of the artists who were teachers and they were influential on you. Are there other artists in the community that you feel like were important to you in terms of either inspiration or finding a voice or just being a kick-ass artist?
Well, community-wise, I think there were some in a slightly different way. Well, they are kick-ass artists too, but the people who build the communities and keep them, I want to say running, but, I guess one person that has been sort of until recently, and it's just because, it's Mark Nowell is like, he was one of my roommates when I first moved to Memphis. Mm-hmm. Then, like I said, somebody who builds community and builds a space for that community. He was one of the first people to move down into the arts district there at martial arts and that area. And he has kind of been a leading or a thread for years that I could always come back to. We've always been friends.
Mm-hmm. And also almost like the coach on the sidelines. Like I remember with a lot of those art farm shows or those community days or open studios, we would do those open studios.
Open studios, yeah.
A lot of times, like if it was up to me, we might not have done that, because like my energy is, I'm more subject to tiredness. But Mark was sort of, I haven't seen Mark in years, but one of those like sort of indefatigable people. I mean, he was just always with the energy and always with the, like, let's do this. We can really do this, and this is going to be good. Yeah, I mean, Mark was really influential in that, but then also making that space, that art farm space where people could set up shows, and then also, like you were saying, the outward facing component with the community, and to try and get them not only activated and excited and engaged, but also, if I remember right, Mark did a ton of stuff in terms of dealing with the people that we don't really want to talk to, the bureaucrats and the politicians and
zoning and
yeah,
absolutely.
And also the press. He was really great.
All those landlords that were down there,
right?
He knew all of them and worked it.
Would deal with them.
So someone, since I've come back from Arkansas, that I see building community like that is Carl Moore. And we were in school together. We were in the same class when going through MCA. But you can't go to an art opening without running into Carl. He's there all the time somewhere.
Now I'm curious. I was asking you before, how do you think people would describe the 20-year-old Tim? I didn't know Carl when he was in school. What was Carl like in terms of his...
He was a graphic design. Mm-hmm. He was in graphics. He was, I don't want to say the star, but he was one of the leading guys in I thought, in the graphic department. Mm-hmm. He was another one that I think would have made much better grades in Bill Womack's class than I did, the one I had trouble with. Mm-hmm. But Carl was rock steady.
Now, was he at every opening back then too?
I don't remember that so much. I remember he was one of the people that would be working in those studios at night, mm-hmm. putting in the time again.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I like the way that you said that. Carl is like by his presence, and then also like by letting other people know what's going on in the community. That sounds right. Any other people that you can think of in terms of people that have been important to you in terms of either community?
Well, of course, Joel. Yeah. I mean, he was my best friend and the person I could talk to about art all the time. Whether it might not even be visual art. We had a lot of literature that we read together, or passed back and forth with each other, and then would discuss, and poetry, and just he was like a brother. So he would be my number one. And, since that's another blow that I had, Hamlet, that was when I had the Guillain Barre, was when we lost Joel. And I won't say I don't blame myself, but I will say I'm a little haunted by the fact that I knew he was in trouble, but I couldn't go because I couldn't.
You couldn't go.
I couldn't go. I was paralyzed. But yeah, that's kind of because any other time I would have just got in the truck and drove out there and got him. I know you're in a dark space. Let's talk about it.
Now, thinking about Joel, I mean, I think one of the things for sure for me that's really kind of powerful about outliving people is having an understanding of the things that we got from them, and the things that we learned from them, and the things that we take from our experience with them to go forward. And I'm curious if you don't mind talking a little bit about some of those things, like in terms of thinking about those lessons, or even the kinds of experiences with Joel.
Well, Joel was super talented. He really was. And he was, you hear that term, a Renaissance man, but he really, he was always exemplifying, I think, the artist life. He was always reading. He was always trying to improve himself. He was always turning that into how does this affect that? Now, me and Joel were also, we learned early on in our relationship, we'd leave a house party to go sit at a bar. It didn't matter if it was a coffee bar or a liquor bar. We did not like groups of people were great, but we liked to sit at a bar and talk and go on and have a couple of beers. But it was always like we'd be at some big opening or some party, and he'd go, "You want to go have a beer? Let's walk down here and have a beer," and just talk, communicate with each other or whoever you happen to sit down. That was the other thing about Joel. He could talk to anybody, and he'd sit down at a bar and just, I knew he was kind of messing with somebody, but he would pull stories out of people and then tell other stories, like maybe teasing them, maybe he's making fun of them and they don't even get it, but or maybe he was genuinely interested and really being, having an empathetic conversation with the person. He was always turn of a dime. He could be funny and witty, and he was super well read. Because he was always trying, again, if there was a book that somebody was talking about, he was going to read it. He read all the time.
I mean, for me, this is kind of like one of those things where it's kind of about people in the world, like Joel to me always struck me as a really deep well, when I would see him, it was clear that he was not shallow. It was clear that he was, really contemplative and really thoughtful. And then also, he was also one of those people that I was always like, oh man, I wish I was cool enough to like hang out with Joel, like he's a really cool guy, like kind of like one of those cool kid kinds of things, like, because he had that mystique, with the tattoos in a time when no one had tattoos. And then also like the hair and the construction and like all of those things. To me, he was kind of like not a character, but there was this mystique around him, and I appreciate you talking about him, because he's also one of those people that when he passed, I remember really thinking like, oh man, like I won't have that opportunity, I won't have that opportunity to hear those stories or to know this person. And that's one of the things I'm sort of glad about this project, to be able to get some of those stories. I'm curious, what were some things that you were talking about reading a lot? You sort of mentioned that before. I'm curious, what are some things that, have you been reading a lot of things lately?
Well,
I mean, you were talking about
Yeah.
that work of art book, but I'm curious, what are some other things that have been occupying your bandwidth?
Oh, let's see. Um, I've been into some things about history lately, some of which I thought were borderline conspiracy theories, but you get into something and you just go down a rabbit hole.
And then everything's a conspiracy theory.
It is these
Yeah,
days.
it really is.
A book called The Fourth Turning is now.
Okay.
It's written by a demographer. Two demographers wrote the first information on the fourth turning, but the fourth turning is now. It talks about how history repeats itself, and it repeats itself in a somewhat predictable way. Every generation repeats similar types of people, like that are born within that generation, fall into different categories, sort of like the hero, the artist is one of them. The elder falls into that eventually. Anyway, that was an interesting book, and you can get down some rabbit holes then listening to YouTube videos with the guy who wrote the book, interviews.
Right.
So yeah, the book was interesting, but the some of those interviews were even more interesting. I'll read all kinds of stuff. I read a lot of natural history stuff and bird things. I'll read a cookbook, front to back. Just read the whole thing. So I've got this lady in Ireland that runs this school that teaches all the basics from like lost knowledge of the basics, like how you grow your food, how you kill your food, how you eat your food, that sort of thing. And it's sitting on my next. It's quite a thick book. It's going to take me a minute to get through that one, but yeah, I'm looking forward to reading that front to back. My husband John reads cookbooks like that. He just goes through them he just burns through them.
Now I'm curious too. Like you mentioned the home. One of the questions I'm always interested in is what art do you have at the house? What art is around you that feeds you?
Oh, that's a good. Well, I have a big Vita Reed. I have one of her paintings. We've talked about her several times.
Hang on. Let's just hang out here for a second. What's the Vita Reed? What's it look like? What's it doing?
It's a very dark painting. It's one of her landscapes, of course, but you can just barely see the cloud formations. It's so dark. And then right at the bottom, there's this burst of light that's orange right at the horizon line. So to me, it was about the light in the darkness, that you can't have one without the other, which of course we know. But yeah, it just reiterates to me that the smallest light can chase away the dark. And yeah, it's like a little ever-burning candle right there in my dining room.
I like that. Now, what period is that from? Around what year?
It was one of her shows I got it from David Lusk. So I would say around the time I was in Arkansas.
Okay.
That's when that show was. So that would have been 2000, 2004, 5.
Okay.
In there.
Yeah. Okay. Nice. What else you got? What else is at the house?
Lida Laneville. She was someone that I went to school with, not well known, but I've got a huge floral painting. She did big flowers. And I've got a tulip painting that you can see through the petal and see the stamen because the way it's backlit. And that's all of her stuff was always she was such a thoughtful. it was like she was a scientist studying plants that just happened to make these big, beautiful paintings of them. Okay, help me with last name here. Wayne, sculptor, does
Edge.
Wayne Edge.
Wayne Edge,
Thank
yeah.
you. My brain.
Now, wait, I don't know Wayne Edge's work very well, but I'm curious what drew you to it? What clicks for you?
Well, I've known Wayne for a long time. Him and his wife Karen. Karen was in the arts and crafts scene when I was doing birdhouses. She was doing tie-dyes and bags. But Wayne I knew from working at Automatic Slims and downtown. He did all the bar work down there.
Right.
And then he's always done all of Karen's restaurants. And so I knew him through that, but followed his work. And when me and John bought our house there in High Point Terrace, we walked into this mid-century modern-ish house, and I said, wow, that fireplace could really use a Wayne Edge right over it. And he remembered that. And then for my 50th birthday, he commissioned Wayne to make a piece for me. And Wayne did one that was called Tim's Path. It's got 50 stones in it.
Whoa.
Great. So my husband, John, made that happen.
And then, I mean, to me, I'm literally just sit here all day and hear you tell me about the things in your house. So, like,
and then, of course, I've got a couple of paintings of Joel's, and I've got a lot, about I'd say 50 of his envelopes,
right,
framed,
right,
and up on the wall.
Well, I remember when you guys put that show together, or
yeah.
it was you helped put that show together, right?
Yeah.
The show at Martial Arts.
To
I
commemorate. Yeah.
I took pictures of every piece there. I mean, especially the envelopes, because I remember going and doing a studio visit with him years ago when he had that little dollhouse in the backyard, and I remember thinking, oh, yeah, I'll take some pictures of these when they're out, and when people can see them. But they never were. And so what ended up happening was I would tell the stories of these envelopes to people, and I didn't have any images to go with them. I took pictures of every single one of those. They're so beautiful.
Absolutely.
And now I'm curious, what are some of the pieces that you've got of Joel's, and then what's going on in them?
I have a self-portrait that he did when he was from a time that he was on vacation down in Mexico, where he's sleeping on a striped pillow, and he's got one of his hands in it. Well, actually, both of them are, but they're so dove-like the way he drew them. They're almost feminine, but they're also just beautiful. And you can see just a hint of his tattoos, that sort of thing. He's wearing a wife beater in the land. Yeah. Anyway, that was one that I got, and then I'm kind of house sitting one that a friend of mine actually owns, but that he doesn't have a place for right now, and it's from actually the last show me and Joel had together, and he's setting and he's looking at his hands, and then there's sort of this big octopus shape or python or something that's all wrapped around him, and then it becomes a design, and then it goes back into the more menacing form of I think of them as octopus tentacles, and yeah, and it's sort of, and within that there's also some other drawings of hands that you can just see through the paint, where he was doing hand studies to get the hands where he wanted them. And then there he is looking at his hands. So,
yeah, I mean, to me, there's something really so wonderful whenever I go to an artist friend's house and I see their house. To me, there's so much importance and curation that goes into there, and in some ways, it's kind of like a peek behind the curtain, or almost like
a time capsule too, because it can be their student works, and then you see where they've gone now. I know I mentioned Emily Jasser was in my graduate class with me. Okay. She was Palestinian, And I have some of her ceramics, which I just absolutely love. And she's gone on and done a couple of shows. She even, I think, had a show at the Whitney. But paintings and other things, and multimedia and video, but I just, every day when I pour my orange juice out of that little pitcher she made, I just love it, and it's just that little click back to all the time I spent with Emily in the studios and us having really good conversations, and the things she taught me about history and the world outside of the way we learn it, a little different history. So yeah, that I've got a little self-portrait of Jim Wines that he did. I love self-portraits, so I'll.
Now I'm curious. You mentioned Jim Wines. I don't know Jim Wines, but tell me about this self-portrait.
It's one that he would have been doing in a beginning painting class, I think, but he's got a real off out of the picture frame light source that's pretty strong, so his features are real in high contrast. And then over to one side there's this odd shape that I know is a hand puppet that's just on the wall, that somebody over there making hand puppet gestures. So yeah, and I saw some of the photography that was sources of that, those kids making images like that. So yeah, he's been, again, a friend that I've had for years. We lived together a couple of times, him and his wife Ann, on and off, or I guess only one time now that I think about it. That's we had a house on Cox Street, but then I visited them a lot in New York when they moved up there, and
So what do you think? What's next?
Oh, what's next? Well, I'm really enjoying being a country gentleman, so to speak. So me and John have moved out to Fayette County. We have 13 acres. I spend as much time in the outdoors as I can. So it's funny, it's kind of gone a little bit back to, I told you my original plan was going to be a field biologist. So between gardening and raising my birds, things I've always done. It's funny, I've always kind of fit birds into my life where I've lived in different ways. Yeah, I've got a studio space now set up. So I'm going to sit out in the country and make some art for a while and play with birds and gardening.
That sounds good to me. Thank you, Tim. I appreciate you coming in.
You're very welcome.
Thank you.
I should have brought you a dozen eggs. Dang.
And that was the second of 2 interviews that we recorded with Tim Andrews. The interview that you just listened to was recorded on March 18th, 2025. Please join us next week when we will have another interview. Until then, thank you for listening.